Han Sung stood at the center of the Grand Assembly Hall and tried very hard not to clench his fists. The hall was enormous. It floated inside a station called the Pinnacle, deep in neutral space, and it was built to make anyone standing in its center feel small. Thousands of alien delegates sat in curved rows that rose high into the ceiling like the inside of a bowl. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no faces at all, just smooth skin stretched over skulls that pulsed with soft light. All of them were looking down at the single human standing below. Sung wore a dark suit. His shoes were polished. His voice was steady. He had practiced this speech 40 times. He was presenting humanity's formal request for full membership in the Galactic Accord, the alliance of 42 species that controlled most of the known galaxy. Humanity had been given observer status 3 years ago. It meant they could watch, they could listen, but they could not speak, could not vote, and could not matter. Today, Sung was asking for that to change. He spoke about Earth's achievements, 200 years of space travel, colonies on 9 worlds, advances in medicine, science, and engineering that had caught the attention of several Accord species. He was polite, he was clear, he used facts and numbers, and kept his voice calm. Nobody was listening. Halfway through his speech, a delegate from the Fenari species yawned so loudly that it echoed through the hall. A group of Dreth representatives whispered to each other and laughed. One tall insect-like creature simply closed its eyes and appeared to fall asleep. Then Grand Sovereign Malvik raised one of his 4 hands, and the hall went silent. Malvik was old, very old. He was from the Dreth hegemony, one of the founding species of the Accord, and he had ruled the Alliance for over 300 years. His skin was gray and rough like stone. His eyes were black and empty. He sat on a raised platform above everyone else, because that was the kind of creature he was. He did not wait for Sung to finish. "The human speaks well," Molvik said, and his voice filled the hall like thunder rolling through a cave. "For an animal." The hall laughed. Molvik continued. He called humanity an adolescent species. He said that humans live such short lives that they could barely understand the universe they stumbled into. He compared them to a child who had found a sharp tool and was now waving it around, demanding to sit at the table with adults. He said that Earth's 200 years in space were a joke compared to the Dreth's 11,000. He said that perhaps, in a few centuries, if humans learned to behave, the Accord might consider their request again. The laughter grew louder. Some delegates clapped. Sung stood perfectly still through all of it. His face showed nothing. When Molvik finished, Sung asked one question. "Is humanity's petition formally denied?" Molvik waved a hand like he was brushing away an insect. "Come back when you have grown up, little species." Sung bowed slightly. Then he turned, walked out of the hall, and did not look back. He returned to Earth 3 days later and played the full recording for the United Earth Council. Admiral Kang Taeho sat at the far end of the long table and watched it in silence. When it ended, nobody spoke. Taeho pressed a button and played it again. He watched Molvik's face very carefully the second time. He watched the laughter. He watched Sung standing alone in that massive hall, surrounded by contempt. Then Taeho closed the file and folded his hands. "We will remember this," he said quietly. That was all. But the insult was not the worst thing that happened that week. 3 days after Sung's humiliation, on the edge of human-controlled space, a colony transport ship called the Bright Morning was making its way toward a newly settled world. It carried 12,000 civilians, families, engineers and teachers, and farmers and children who had never seen the colony they were heading to. They were flying through neutral space, which belonged to no one. Commander Ullith found them there. Ullith was Malvik's top military officer. He commanded an Accord patrol fleet of 15 warships. He was proud and aggressive, and he had spent his career enforcing Accord authority on smaller species. When his sensors detected the bright morning, he changed course to intercept. He ordered the transport to stop. He demanded that it reroute through Accord space and pay a transit fee. The transport captain, a retired naval officer named Go Min-soo, refused. They were in neutral space. There was no law that required them to pay anything to anyone. Ullith opened fire. The bright morning was not a warship. It had no weapons. It had basic shields meant to deflect space debris, not military-grade plasma. The first volley tore through the lower decks. The second destroyed the engine block. The ship went dark and began to drift. By the time rescue ships arrived from the nearest human colony, 463 people were dead. 71 of them were children. The youngest was 4 months old. Ullith reported the incident to Malvik as a routine border enforcement action. He described the humans as belligerent and non-compliant. Malvik read the report, approved it, and filed it away. He did not ask about casualties. He did not care. Earth received the distress signal 6 hours later. Admiral Tejo read the casualty list in his office, alone. He read every name. He read every age. When he reached the end, he sat in silence for a very long time. Then he called his aide and said 5 words. "Get me Captain Yoon." Far away, on a small outpost at the edge of Accord space, a Fenari diplomat named Paschal stared at the intelligence report on his screen. His hands trembled. He had spent years studying humans. He had read their history. He knew what they did when they were pushed too far. He knew what was coming. He sent an emergency message to Malvik's office. It read, "You do not understand what you have done. These beings do not forget. They do not forgive, and they do not lose." The message was deleted without being opened. That night, across Earth's solar system, orbital shipyards that had been quiet for decades began to light up. One by one, like stars waking from a long sleep, they powered on. Factories hummed. Furnaces roared. Metal screamed as it was shaped into something terrible and beautiful. Humanity was not writing a response. Humanity was not filing a complaint. Humanity was building a fist. 3 months passed, and Earth said nothing. The Galactic Accord expected anger. They expected threats, sanctions, harsh words delivered through diplomatic channels. That was how younger species behaved when they were hurt. They screamed, they made noise, and then eventually they accepted their place and went quiet. But Earth did not scream. Earth simply vanished. All diplomatic communication stopped. Trade agreements were left unanswered. Requests for meetings were ignored. The human embassy at the Pinnacle was closed overnight, its staff gone by morning, every file and piece of furniture removed, as if humans had never been there at all. Even civilian channels went dark. Human merchant ships stopped appearing at trading stations. Human signals disappeared from the communication networks. It was as if someone had erased humanity from the galaxy. The Accord sent inquiries, polite at first, then firm, then demanding. They sent long-range scanning probes toward Earth's solar system to see what was happening. Every single probe was destroyed the moment it crossed the border of human space. Cleanly, instantly, no warning, no message, just silence where the probe used to be. Some species began to feel uneasy. A few diplomats raised concerns at the assembly, but Grand Sovereign Malvik silenced them with a wave of his hand. "The humans have crawled back into their hole," he told the assembly. "This is what lesser species do when they learn their place. Their silence is not strength, it is surrender." He smiled, and the hall relaxed. If Malvik was not worried, then there was nothing to worry about. Envoy Paschal was not relaxed. From his reassigned outpost at the edge of nowhere, Paschal had spent the last 3 months reading everything he could find about human history. He had read about their world wars. He had read about what happened at a place called Stalingrad, where humans had eaten leather and frozen in snow rather than surrender a single city. He had read about a place called Thermopylae, where 300 humans held a narrow pass against an army that outnumbered them beyond reason. He had read about Hiroshima. He had read about D-Day. He understood something that Mulvik did not. When humans went quiet, it did not mean they had given up. It meant they were getting ready. Paschal sent one last report to Commander Ulith, who was still patrolling the border as if nothing had happened. The report was detailed. It contained analysis, historical examples, and a very clear warning. Ulith read the first page, laughed, and deleted it. He called Paschal a coward and had his communication access reduced. Paschal sat alone in his small office and stared at the wall. There was nothing more he could do. Inside Earth's solar system, the truth was far worse than anything the Accord imagined. Admiral Kang Tae-ho had activated the Midnight Protocol on the same day he read the casualty list from the Bright Morning. It was a contingency plan that Earth's military had developed in secret over the last 50 years. It was designed for one scenario: total war against a superior galactic power. And it was terrifying. Every shipyard in the solar system was running at full capacity. Earth, Mars, the orbital platforms around Jupiter and Saturn, all of them were building warships at a pace that would have shocked any species in the galaxy. Humans did not build slowly and carefully like the Accord. Humans built fast and mean. Their ships were smaller, lighter, and far more agile than anything the Accord had. They were not designed for elegant fleet formations. They were designed to get close, hit hard, and move before the enemy could react. Im Somi, the head of Earth's Weapons Research Division, had not slept more than 4 hours a night in 3 months. She and her team had spent years studying every alien technology they could get their hands on. They had reverse-engineered Accord shield systems. They had found weaknesses in every known alien warship design, and they had built things that no other species would ever think to build, because no other species thought like humans. Her greatest creation sat in a classified hangar on the dark side of the moon. She called it the Hammer of Dawn. It was a long-range kinetic bombardment system that could fire projectiles through faster-than-light space. It could destroy an entire fleet before they even knew they were under attack. When Tae-ho reviewed the test results, he stared at the numbers for a long time, and then said, "Let us hope we never have to use this more than once." Shin Nari, the head of Earth's Intelligence Division, had been even busier than Somi. Her operatives had infiltrated the Accord's communication networks months ago, long before the attack on the Bright Morning. She knew the location of every Accord fleet. She knew their patrol schedules, their supply routes, their command codes, and the private communications of every senior Accord officer. The Accord had no idea. They did not even know that humans were capable of this kind of intelligence work. Nari sat in her dark office, surrounded by screens, and watched the Accord go about its business. She knew more about their military than their own commanders did. She had already identified every target. She had already written the attack sequence. She was just waiting for Tae-ho to say the word. Captain Yoon Hana ran combat drills every single day aboard the Iron Orchid, Earth's most powerful warship. Her crew was exhausted. Her drills were brutal. She simulated every possible battle scenario, every failure, every disaster. She pushed her people until they broke, and then she pushed them further. Bae Ji-ho, her young tactical officer, worked beside her around the clock, designing attack patterns that no alien species had ever seen. One night, during a rare quiet moment on the bridge, Ji-ho asked Hana if she thought they were ready. Hana looked out at the stars through the viewport. "Ready is what happens when you have no more time to prepare," she said. "We will be ready, because we have to be. Park Do-hun trained his Marines in something the galaxy had never seen before: orbital drop operations. Every war the Accord had ever fought was ship against ship in the vacuum of space. Nobody landed troops on planets. The idea was considered primitive and insane. Do-hun's Marines trained to fall from orbit in armored pods, survive the landing, and fight on the ground. They trained in every environment: ice, desert, jungle, vacuum, underwater. They trained until dropping from space felt as normal as walking through a door. The fleet assembled behind Jupiter. 400 warships, hidden in the shadow of the giant planet, completely invisible to any sensor the Accord possessed. They floated in the dark, like wolves waiting in the trees. Admiral Tejo stood on the bridge of his command ship and reviewed the final battle plan one last time. It was not a defensive plan. There were no fallback positions, no retreats, no contingencies for failure. It was a single, massive, coordinated strike designed to hit the Accord in dozens of places at the same time. Every target had been chosen. Every second had been planned. He looked at his officers. Then he opened a communication channel to the Galactic Accord and sent a message that would be remembered for as long as the galaxy existed. To the Galactic Accord: you killed our children. You mocked our grief. You mistook our patience for weakness. Congratulations. You now have the full, undivided attention of the human race. We suggest you pray to whatever gods you have. He closed the channel. He nodded to his fleet commander. And behind Jupiter, 400 warships jumped to faster-than-light speed at the same moment. A wall of light erupted from the darkness, bright enough to be seen from 1 billion kilometers away, aimed directly at the heart of the Accord. The silence was over. The first alarms sounded on an Accord listening post near the Vareth corridor at exactly 0300 Galactic Standard Time. The officer on duty barely had time to read the sensor data before the post went dark. No distress call, no final message, just gone. Across the galaxy, 60 more alarms sounded in the next 4 minutes. Then the alarms stopped, because Shin Nari's intelligence team killed them. They reached into the Accord's communication network like a hand reaching into a machine and pulled out its spine. Relay stations went offline. Emergency channels filled with static. Fleet commanders tried to contact each other and heard nothing. In 18 minutes, the 42 species of the Galactic Accord became 42 species sitting alone in the dark, wondering what was happening. Then, the human ships arrived. Commander Ullith was patrolling the Vareth corridor with 200 warships when his sensors lit up with contacts. 60 human vessels dropped out of faster-than-light speed in a scattered formation that made no sense to him. His ships were big, heavy, and powerful. Each one carried enough firepower to crack a moon. The human ships were small. Some of them were barely a third the size of his cruisers. He outnumbered them more than 3 to 1. Ullith smiled. He had fought dozens of battles in his career, and he had never lost. He ordered his fleet into standard encirclement formation, a classic Accord tactic that had worked for 1,000 years. His ships spread out in a wide arc, moving to surround the human fleet and crush it from all sides. Captain Yoon Hana watched the Accord fleet spread out and felt something that was almost pity. Almost. They are separating, Bei Jiho said from his tactical station, his eyes moving across 3 screens at once. Standard ring formation. They are making themselves thin. I know, Hana said. Execute pattern 9. The 60 human ships shattered like glass. They split into 12 independent attack groups of 5 ships each and scattered in every direction. The Accord formation, designed to surround a single enemy force, suddenly had 12 enemy forces moving at impossible speed through the gaps in their line. Ullith's officers panicked. They tried to adjust, but Accord ships were not built for quick turns. They were built for slow, powerful advances. By the time the first Accord cruiser turned to face the nearest human group, 3 human ships had already passed behind it and fired directly into its engines. The cruiser went dark. It happened everywhere at once. Human ships moved like nothing the Accord had ever seen. They were fast, unpredictable, and coordinated in a way that seemed impossible. Each group of 5 ships worked together like fingers on a hand. They struck engines, weapon systems, and command bridges with surgical accuracy. They did not waste a single shot. Jiho sat at his station and conducted the battle like a musician conducting an orchestra. Every attack group reported to him. Every target was assigned. Every movement was timed to the second. He had spent 3 months planning this, running thousands of simulations, and now he watched it unfold exactly as he had designed it. In 4 hours, 140 Accord ships were destroyed or disabled. The rest were scattered and running. Aleth's flagship, its engines dead and its bridge burning, drifted through the wreckage. Hana sent a boarding team. Aleth was captured alive. Not because Hana was merciful, because Admiral Tejo had ordered it. He wanted Aleth to see what came next. While the Vereth corridor burned, something even more shocking happened on the surface of Thesson Prime. Thesson Prime was a major Accord military world. It had ground bases, supply depots, and a planetary defense grid that could destroy any ship in orbit. No enemy had ever set foot on its surface. No species in the galaxy was foolish enough to try landing soldiers on a defended planet from orbit. Park Do-hoon and the 1st Orbital Drop Division fell from the sky like burning meteors. 2,000 Marines in armored drop pods punched through the atmosphere at speeds that would have killed any other species. The pods screamed through clouds of fire and anti-aircraft plasma, twisting and turning to avoid the defense grid's targeting systems. Some pods were hit. Some Marines died before they ever touched the ground, but most of them landed. Do-hoon hit the dirt, rolled, and was firing before the dust settled. His Marines poured out of their pods and moved with a speed and aggression that the alien defenders could not understand. The Accord had ground troops, but they had never fought a real ground war. Their training was for patrols and peacekeeping. They had never faced anything like human infantry. Humans had been fighting on the ground for 10,000 years. It was in their blood. Do-hoon's Marines moved through the defense installations like water through cracks. They used tactics that had been refined through centuries of warfare on Earth. Room by room, building by building. They communicated without speaking, using hand signals and instinct born from brutal training. The alien soldiers fought back, but they were outmatched in every way that mattered. Cha Eun-ji moved behind the front lines with her medical team. She patched wounds, stopped bleeding, and kept Marines alive with steady hands and a calm voice. When they overran the first enemy position and found wounded alien soldiers, she treated them too. The alien prisoners stared at her in confusion. They had expected to be executed. Instead, a human woman was bandaging their wounds and giving them water. The planetary defense grid fell in 9 hours. Thesson Prime belonged to humanity. Back in space, the Accord's nightmare was getting worse. 14 of their reserve fleets had been scrambled from staging areas across the galaxy, rushing toward the fighting. The largest of them, 80 warships strong, was moving at full speed through a transit corridor when Im Somi's weapon found them. The Hammer of Dawn fired from a platform hidden deep in an asteroid field, 3 star systems away. The projectiles traveled through faster-than-light space and arrived before any sensor could detect them. 80 warships, thousands of crew, gone in an instant. No explosion that anyone could see from the outside, just empty space where a fleet used to be. The transit corridor was silent. When the report reached the remaining Accord commanders, some of them simply turned their fleets around and went home. They did not ask for permission. They did not inform their allies. They just left. At the pinnacle, Grand Sovereign Molvik sat in his chambers and stared at the reports coming in. Each one was worse than the last. The Verath Corridor lost. Thesson Prime taken. An entire reserve fleet erased. Communications across the Accord crippled. He kept waiting for the reports to stop. They did not stop. For the first time in 300 years of rule, Molvik felt something cold and unfamiliar crawling through his body. It took him a moment to recognize it, because he had never felt it before. It was fear. He ordered a full mobilization of every remaining Accord fleet. But the mobilization was chaos. Species could not coordinate without their communication network. Fleets that were supposed to combine in one location arrived at different times or not at all. Some species began pulling their ships back to defend their own homeworlds, breaking the alliance apart from the inside. They trusted each other less than they feared the humans. Nari had planned for this too. She had spent months studying the rivalries between Accord species. She knew which ones hated each other. She knew which ones would panic first. She had designed the communication blackout specifically to turn the Accord's diversity into its greatest weakness. On his distant outpost, Envoy Paschal watched the war unfold on whatever scattered reports reached him. His hands shook. His eyes were wet. He had tried so hard to prevent this. He whispered to his empty room, I told them what these creatures are. Aboard the Iron Orchid, which was still burning through the last of the wreckage in the Verath Corridor, Hana opened a channel to Admiral Tejo's command ship. Verath Corridor secured, Admiral. Her voice was flat and professional, as if she were reporting the weather. Awaiting next target. There was a brief pause. Then Tejo's voice came back, steady and quiet and absolutely certain. All of them, Captain. The next target is all of them. 2 weeks into the war, the Galactic Accord began to die. Not from the outside. Humanity's fleets were devastating, yes, but the real killing blow came from within. The alliance that had held 42 species together for thousands of years was tearing itself apart, and all humanity had to do was watch. It started with the Fenari. They were a small, cautious species that had always been uncomfortable with Molvik's aggressive leadership. 3 days after the Battle of the Verath Corridor, the Fenari government sent a private message to Han Sung, who was now operating from a command ship alongside the fleet. The message was short and desperate. They wanted peace. They had never supported the attack on the Bright Morning, and they were willing to discuss any terms. Sung accepted. He was gracious. He treated the Fenari diplomats with the same respect he would have shown to any equal, and he drew up fair terms that asked for nothing unreasonable. When the agreement was signed, the Fenari were stunned. They had expected punishment. They received dignity. That scared the rest of the Accord far more than any weapon could have. Within a week, 13 more species had contacted Sung. Some were afraid. Some were ashamed. Some simply looked at the map and understood that the war was already lost. Sung accepted each surrender with the same calm professionalism, adjusting terms for each species, never asking for more than was fair. Humanity was not punishing the galaxy. Humanity was showing the galaxy what it had missed when it looked down on them. Molvik watched his alliance crumble in real time. He called an emergency session of the Assembly and gave a speech about unity and civilization and the sacred bonds that held the Accord together. His voice thundered through the hall, the way it always had. But halfway through his speech, 3 more species announced their withdrawal from the Accord. Their delegates stood up and walked out while Molvik was still talking. The doors closed behind them, and the sound echoed through the half-empty hall, like a grave being sealed. Molvik stood alone at his podium and stared at the empty seats. The power he had held for 3 centuries was melting through his fingers like water, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Aboard the Iron Orchid, Commander Ulif sat in a holding cell. He had been treated well. He was fed. His injuries from the battle had been treated by human doctors. He had not been beaten, threatened, or humiliated. This confused him deeply, because it was not what he would have done to a captured enemy. Captain Hana came to see him on the 14th day. She walked into the cell, carrying a single data tablet. She pulled up a chair, sat down across from him, and placed the tablet on the table between them. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. Uleth looked at it. It was a list of names, human names, written in a language he could not read, but that the tablet translated for him. Next to each name was a number. "Those are the people who died on the bright morning," Hana said. 463 names. The numbers are their ages. She pushed the tablet closer. "Read them." Ulef stared at her. "I will not." "You will," Hana said. Her voice was quiet, but carried a weight that filled the room. "You will read every name and every age, because that is the least you owe them." Something in her eyes told Uleth that this was not a request. He picked up the tablet and began to read. The names meant nothing to him at first. They were strange sounds, alien syllables. But then he began to notice the ages. 34, 27, 61, 8, 5, 11, 2, 4 months. His voice slowed. His hands tightened on the tablet. By the time he reached the end of the list, his throat was dry, and his voice was barely a whisper. Hana watched him the entire time. She did not speak. She did not shout or curse or threaten. She simply watched. When he finished, she took the tablet back. "That is why we are here," she said. Then she stood up and left. Uleth sat alone in his cell for a long time. He did not move. The human fleet arrived at the pinnacle 4 days later. The Accord had gathered everything it had left. 500 warships from a dozen species assembled in a defensive formation around the station. It was the largest fleet the Accord had ever put together in one place. Their commanders believed for the first time that they had the advantage. Tejo had 300 ships. The numbers were finally in the Accord's favor. He brought his fleet to a full stop, just outside weapons range, and waited. For 6 hours, nothing happened. The human fleet sat in perfect formation, silent. The Accord fleet grew nervous. Captains started talking on open channels, arguing about strategy. Some species accused others of cowardice. Old rivalries surfaced. A fleet of Veshan ships refused to take a forward position because they believed the Dreth were using them as shields. A group of Thalian cruisers threatened to leave if their demands for command authority were not met. Tejo listened to all of it. Nari's intelligence team had tapped into their communications weeks ago. He heard every argument, every accusation, every crack in their unity. Then he began to send messages, not to the fleet as a whole, to individual ships, to individual captains, to individual species. Each message was different. Each one was carefully written. Some offered survival. Some offered alliance. Some simply stated facts about what had happened to the last fleet that fought humanity. 90 ships pulled out of the Accord formation within 2 hours. They powered down their weapons and drifted to the side. Their captains had decided that dying for Malvik was not something they were willing to do. The remaining 410 ships were shaken, angry, and afraid. Their formation had holes. Their communication was full of distrust. They were an alliance in name only. Tejo gave the order. Hana led the vanguard. The Iron Orchid punched through the center of the Accord line like a blade through cloth. Jiho coordinated 12 attack groups simultaneously, each one exploiting a different gap in the enemy formation. Human ships moved between the larger Accord vessels, too fast and too close for the heavy weapons to track. The battle became a storm of light and metal and fire. It lasted less than 3 hours. When it was over, The Accord fleet was shattered. Broken ships drifted in every direction. Escape pods filled the void. And the pinnacle, the great station that had been the seat of galactic power for millennia, hung in space, surrounded by wreckage. Dohun's Marines boarded the station. They moved through its corridors with the same deadly efficiency they had shown on Thesson Prime. But Teho's orders were specific. Minimal casualties. Alien delegates were detained, not harmed. Staff were escorted to safe zones. Unji set up a medical station in the main atrium and treated wounded Accord personnel alongside wounded Marines. A young alien soldier with a shattered arm asked her through tears why she was helping him. She looked at him and said, "Because the war is with your leaders, not with you." Malvik was found in his private chambers, frantically trying to destroy data files. Dohun's Marines secured him without a fight. He did not resist. He did not speak. He simply stared at the armored humans surrounding him with wide, black, disbelieving eyes. They brought him to the Grand Assembly Hall. Admiral Teho was already there, standing at the center of the room, in the exact spot where Han Sung had stood months ago. The same spot where Sung had been mocked and dismissed and called an animal. Malvik was placed before him. The hall was empty, except for Marines and officers. It was silent. Teho looked at Malvik for a long time. His face showed nothing. Then he spoke. "You called us animals. You killed our families. You laughed." His voice was calm, steady, not loud. "Do you know the difference between your kind and mine, Sovereign? When you had power over us, you used it to humiliate. Now, we have power over you." He paused. "And we are going to do something you never expected." He turned and nodded to Han Sung, who stepped forward, carrying a document. Sung placed it on the table in front of Malvik. It was not a declaration of conquest. It was not a demand for surrender. It was a proposed treaty. Fair terms, mutual respect, reparations for the dead, and a restructuring of the galactic order with humanity as a founding equal member. Malvik stared at the document. He looked up at Teho, searching for the trick, the trap, the cruelty he was sure was coming. There was none. There was only a man standing where an insult had been given, offering something better than revenge. The Treaty of Pinnacle was signed on a Tuesday. Malvik signed it with a hand that trembled so badly he could barely hold the instrument. He did not look at anyone in the room. When it was done, he placed the tool down and sat in silence, staring at the table like a man who had just watched his world end. In a way, he had. The terms were firm but not cruel. The Galactic Accord was dissolved. In its place, a new body was created called the Galactic Commonwealth, built on the principle that no species was above another, regardless of how long they had been in space or how many worlds they controlled. Every species received equal representation. There would be no Grand Sovereign. There would be no lesser species. There would be no observer status. Humanity received a permanent seat on the governing council, because every other species agreed that the beings who could have conquered the galaxy and chose not to had earned the right to help lead it. Reparations were paid to the families of the 463 people killed on the bright morning. No amount of money or resources could bring back the dead, but the gesture mattered. It said that the galaxy acknowledged what had been done, and that the lives lost were not nothing. Commander Ulleth was tried before an interspecies tribunal. The trial lasted 3 weeks. He was found guilty of unprovoked aggression, destruction of a civilian vessel, and the murder of 463 unarmed beings. He was sentenced to permanent exile on an uninhabited world, alone with the names he had been forced to read. Some said the sentence was too light. Others said being left alone with what he had done was punishment enough. Grand Sovereign Malvik was removed from power and stripped of all titles. The Dreth hegemony, humiliated by the actions of their leader, offered no objection. Molvik was exiled to a small, cold moon on the far edge of Dreth's space. He would live out the rest of his long life there, surrounded by silence. Some thought it was fitting. A being who had loved the sound of his own voice more than anything would now hear nothing at all. Han Sung delivered humanity's first address to the new Galactic Commonwealth. He stood at the same podium in the same hall, wearing the same dark suit he had worn the day he was humiliated. But everything else was different. Every seat was filled, every delegate was silent, and every eye in the room was on him, not with contempt, but with something far more powerful: attention. Sung spoke about Earth. He spoke about its long, bloody history. He spoke about the wars that had nearly destroyed humanity before they ever reached the stars. He spoke about the famines and plagues and cruelties that humans had inflicted on each other for thousands of years. He did not hide from it. He did not pretend that humanity was innocent or pure. Then he spoke about the other side: the art, the music, the science, the way humans built hospitals on the same ground where battles had been fought, the way they wrote love poems in the middle of wars, the way they carried their wounded and buried their dead and kept going, always kept going, no matter how many times they were knocked down. "We did not come to the stars to conquer," he said. "We came to find equals. When we were treated as less than that, we showed you what we are capable of. Now we ask, not demand, to build something better, together." The hall was silent for a long time. Then a single pair of hands began to clap. It was Envoy Paschal, sitting in a proper delegate's seat for the first time in his career, his small eyes bright with something that looked like hope. Others followed. The applause spread through the hall like a wave, slow at first, then building until it filled the enormous space and echoed off the high ceiling. Paschal was appointed as the Commonwealth's first liaison to Earth. It was a position that surprised everyone except the humans, who had read his warnings and his reports and knew that he had been the only voice of reason in a room full of fools. He met Sung privately after the ceremony, and stood in silence for a moment before speaking. "I spent years warning them about your kind," he said. "Now I think I was warning them about the wrong thing. I told them you were dangerous. I should have told them you were good." It was the first real smile anyone had seen from him in months. Admiral Tejo quietly decommissioned the wartime fleet protocols. The Hammer of Dawn was placed in secure storage. The orbital drop divisions were stood down. The war machine that humanity had built in 3 months was carefully, deliberately put to sleep. Tejo visited the memorial that had been built in orbit around Earth. It was simple: a ring of 463 lights floating in the darkness of space, one for each person lost on the bright morning. No words, no monuments, just light. He stood alone by the viewport for a long time, looking at those lights. Hana found him there, as she always seemed to when he needed someone nearby. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I keep thinking about them," Tejo said. "The ones we lost. Whether they would be proud of what we did, or ashamed." Hana stood beside him and looked at the lights. "That is what makes us human." Bei Jiho was promoted and assigned to help build the Commonwealth's new Joint Defense Force. He worked alongside alien officers who just weeks ago had been shooting at his ships. The first few days were awkward. Then they became professional. Then, slowly, over shared meals and late nights studying star maps together, something started to grow that might one day become trust. Park Do-hoon returned to Earth with his Marines. He had lost 47 soldiers during the war. Not a large number by the standards of the battles they had fought. But Do-hoon did not think in terms of numbers. He thought in terms of names. He visited every family personally. He did not send messages or recordings. He went to their homes, sat in their living rooms, and told them how their sons and daughters had fought, and what they had meant to the people who served beside them. He did not skip a single one. Somi was offered the position of Chief Technology Advisor to the Galactic Commonwealth. She accepted. But when the Commonwealth Council asked her to share the Hammer of Dawn's design specifications, she politely refused. When they asked why, she looked at them calmly and said, "Trust is built slowly, and we are not fools." Nobody argued. Sha Yunji published a medical database that she had compiled during the war. It contained everything she had learned about alien biology from treating wounded soldiers of a dozen different species. It was the first comprehensive guide of its kind. Within a year, it became the most widely used medical text in the Commonwealth. Alien doctors who had spent centuries studying only their own species suddenly had a resource that covered all of them. It saved thousands of lives. Yunji did not accept any awards. She said the knowledge belonged to everyone. Shinari remained in the shadows, as she always had. Her intelligence network was quietly maintained. She did not dismantle it. She did not reduce its capabilities. When Sung asked her if she would ever stand down, she looked at him with her unreadable eyes and said, "The galaxy just learned what happens when you push us. My job is to make sure they never forget, and that we are never caught off guard again." Sung nodded and did not ask again. 1 year later, on a bright morning aboard a newly built interspecies academy station, a young alien student raised her hand during a history class. The instructor was an older human man with gray hair and a scar on his jaw that he never explained. "Is it true," the student asked, "that your species almost destroyed itself before it reached the stars?" The instructor smiled. It was a tired smile, the kind that came from someone who had seen too much and somehow kept going anyway. "Many times," he said. "We came close, more than once. There were moments when it looked like we would not make it, but we did." "How?" the student asked. The instructor leaned against his desk and thought about it. "Because that is what humans do," he said. "You can break us, you can burn us, you can mock us and betray us and push us to the edge of everything. And we will still get back up. Not because we are the strongest, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but because we are stubborn, and because we fight hardest for the people standing next to us." The classroom was quiet. The alien students looked at each other. Some of them had parents who had fought against humans in the war. Some of them were here because of the peace that followed. All of them were listening. Far above the academy station, through the viewport that stretched across the ceiling, ships moved against the stars. Human ships and alien ships flying side by side on joint patrols. Trade vessels from a dozen worlds following routes that had not existed a year ago. Construction platforms building new stations where species that had never spoken to each other now worked together. It was not a perfect galaxy. It would never be perfect. There were old wounds that would take generations to heal, and grudges that would not fade easily. But it was a galaxy that understood something now. Something it would never forget. Something that had been carved into its memory by fire and blood and mercy. Do not provoke the humans, not because they will destroy you, but because they will make you realize, in the most painful way possible, that you were wrong about them from the very beginning.